for introducing my colleague and I, and also Heidi for assisting in organizing the staff assembly. We're delighted to be here and the opportunity to be here this afternoon. And as many of you may know, May is recognized as the Mental Health Awareness Month. And in spirit of such, we are here to further a discussion about the importance of taking care of our mental health and the undeniable reality that it is a very stressful world. So Liena and myself will guide this conversation in more detail. We will be discussing what mental health is versus mental illness, explore contributing and protective factors, also some relevant facts, some signs and symptoms, as well as coping strategies and resources that we're hoping that are useful and helpful for all of you. Okay, we also want to make this webinar as engaging as possible. We will be utilizing QR codes for anonymous polls. If throughout the presentation there are any questions, we do welcome those, and we encourage you to enter those on the Q&A box located at the bottom. And we will go ahead and revisit and address some of these questions at the end of our presentation. Okay. And I'll go ahead and hand it over to you, Liena.
All right. Thanks, Karina. Good afternoon, everybody. Yes, thank you, Pam and Heidi, for getting this set up. And so important to recognize this month of May. And I hope really it's going to go beyond May, right, in terms of our awareness of our mental health. So like Karina mentioned, I am going to talk a little bit about, what is mental health. And I thought it was the best way to kind of kick that off, to first define it and also better understand it. And we often hear the terms mental health or mental illness or mental health condition. And you may wonder, what is the difference, if there is a difference? Once again, being May is Mental Health Awareness Month, not only to try and define these two terms to kick us off, but also, better understand what it is and what that may mean for each of us. And then we'll maybe be able to know what to do to take care of our mental health. So mental health is an overall term that really describes our emotional, our psychological, and our social well-being. It's the state of our mental health that impacts how we think and how we feel and how we act, right? It also determines how we handle our stress, even how we relate and connect with other people, and really our ability to make healthy choices. Mental health is also about how we're striving, how we're coping and managing. And, we're not aware of how we're doing in all these areas, emotionally, physically, psychologically. We often do find ourselves struggling, right? In our relationships, at work and at home, with our own health, physical health, as well as mental health, our day-to-day living, and just the overall quality of life in general. So again, mental health is an umbrella term to describe our overall emotional, physical, psychological, and social well-being. And when we take care of our mental health, we are also taking steps to try to, minimize or even possibly prevent anything more concerning from arising, such as a mental illness or mental health condition. And the more common conditions that you may experience or even know about are depression, anxiety, panic disorder, bipolar disorder, and so forth. And all of those conditions can have a much greater impact on our overall well-being as well as functioning day to day. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it back over to Karina, who will be talking to us about the contributing factors to our mental health state.
Thank you, Liena. And now that we have more of a distinction between mental health and mental illness, it is important to recognize the different layers that impact our mental health. I know, Liena, you mentioned, there's different factors. So biologically, some individuals are genetically predisposed to developing some symptoms or being diagnosed with a mental health disorder at some point in their lives, right? Like that's within the genetic makeup. There's also another component, which can be substance use or misuse, and how this can directly impact our physiology. It can alter or inhibit our mood. It can disrupt sleep cycles. It can affect our appetite. And as I've learned to conceptualize this for myself, thinking about it in in terms of the big four, right? Sort of like thinking about physical activity. Are we moving throughout the day? Or nutrition. Are there days that we're skipping meals because we're so busy back to back doing things? Is there hydration going on? Are we drinking enough water? And sunlight, right? Are we getting outside? In this hybrid model, right? Like when we are home, are we taking breaks, getting up, getting some sunlight, right? So thinking about those four components and how those directly can also impact our biological factor in mental health. Right. And the next one, so psychological. The psychological factor, this relates more to our own levels of stress, our thoughts, our perceptions, or narrative around mental health. There might be some stigma, right? And how do we move through that stigma based on our cultural background, or how maybe individuals may face discrimination or microaggressions, and also maybe some of the demands of our lives, right? Having to switch off multiple hats and our roles may be constantly shifting and changing. That can be a factor. Socially too, the social component in our mental health, this is where we find our support system. These are the people maybe in our circle who are able to provide moral support, maybe emotional support, instrumental or monetary support, right? Or maybe are there any barriers to our support system or accessing a support system? Is there a lack of support, right? So vice versa. And also the relationships, like our quality of our connections. And in this social component too, maybe there's social media factors, or this is where we find the career, the workplace, maybe some financial or legal stressors. This can all also impact and contribute to our mental health. Right. And lastly, the environmental factor, right? Because there's also very real factors that influence our mental health outside of ourselves and in a larger scale, such as our environment, our community, global events, and especially as of lately with elections coming up, global wars, post-pandemic transitions. So these are all a big component as to how we navigate through these stressors and how these factors play a part into how we, our ability to cope with these multiple layers. And in the grand scheme of things, really having an understanding of how these interconnect can yield to more insight, to more awareness, to our own sort of responses. And this can guide us in saying, okay, how do I use these copings? When do I use the strategies? And how can I resort to maybe more protective factors to be able to take care of my mental health? And the next slide. Okay, so looking at this illustration, so what are protective factors? So protective factors are the sources that provide a sense of well-being. So take a look at this illustration. For example, we see here maybe awareness and access to physical and mental health, which I hope this presentation can bring more of that awareness piece, knowing where to go, knowing where to call. That's a protective factor in terms of being proactive, in terms of seeking that support. And maybe let's take a look at positive peer relationships too, how the quality of our relationships can generate a sense of well-being, right? Maybe think of someone that brings sort of that immediate joy. Maybe it's just recharging batteries every time you see this person. So the quality of those relationships that add to our overall sense of well-being. And also maybe problem-solving skills, right? As we encounter a lot of these stressors and maybe barriers, maybe and getting in tune with this protective factor, and how do we go about problem solving, and what resilience are we pulling from that allows us to keep going and keep finding those solutions. So that can be another protective factor. So what I would like for you all to do is just take a moment at this picture, take a look at these factors, maybe thinking thinking of it as strengths, strength-based, protective factors, and asking yourself, what current factors or what protective factors do I currently have in my life? Are there any strengths that you're already utilizing and pulling from your toolbox that has been allowing you to take care of your mental health? Okay, so just take a moment. And next slide. Okay, so now we are going to change pace for a minute. And this next portion is where we would like to engage with you and learn more about individual perspectives over the next 4 statements. So what we would like for you to do is to scan the QR code located at the bottom. And you can do so by using your phone. Once you go ahead and scan that, this will redirect you to a completely anonymous survey where you will have the option of selecting between myth or fact. Okay, and then after everybody enters their response, then we will be able to see the results. Okay, so go ahead and take a minute and scan the QR code, and Caleb will be assisting us with seeing the results that come in. So we'll go ahead and take a minute or two. And the myth or the fact reads, people with mental health concerns are more likely to be unpredictable and violent. Okay, so people with mental health concerns are more likely to be unpredictable and violent. So go ahead and enter your response. There's no right or wrong answers.
All right, thank you, Karina. So we'll give it one more moment. As Karina mentioned, go ahead and just scan this QR code with your phone camera. It should be pretty straightforward from there. And I will share the results in just a moment.
Thank you, Caleb.
Okay, I will go ahead and share. And let me zoom in. Okay, hopefully this is clearer.
Okay, so there's a consensus here. Yes. Okay, so the answer is myth. This is a myth. And why is this a myth? So, on the contrary, so the fact is that most people with mental health conditions are not more likely to be violent than anyone else. As what we have found is that most people with mental illness are not more violent, and only 3 to 5% of violent acts can be attributed to an individual living with severe mental illness. And as a matter of fact, people with severe mental illness are over 10 times more likely to be the victims of violent crimes than the general population. And this is derived from the mentalhealth.gov. So yes, the answer is a myth. Okay. Thank you for participating. Now we'll do the next one. Okay, so the next myth or fact, same process. So this reads, people with mental health needs have trouble tolerating the stress associated with keeping and maintaining a job. Okay, so people with mental health needs have trouble tolerating the stress associated with keeping and maintaining a job. So go ahead and scan the QR code.
All right, thank you everyone for submitting your responses. Yes, as Karina mentioned, same exact process, and I will share results in just a moment. And re-emphasizing that this is all anonymous.
Thank you, Caleb.
All right, thanks everyone. I'll go ahead and share the results now.
Thank you. So we have, okay, a fact with 63% and a myth 37%. Okay. So going back to the to the statement. So people with mental health needs have trouble tolerating the stress associated with keeping and maintaining a job. Okay. So most of us fact, some myth. Okay. Perfect. So I think this can open the conversation. So the answer is myth. Okay, and here are some of the reasons as to why that is. Okay, so people with mental health conditions can be just as productive as other employees. The caveat to that, though, especially is like when they're being able to manage the mental health condition well, having access to those coping strategies, having access to those resources, and being able to manage that. So employers sometimes they do not know if there's a condition or a mental health condition, but if the condition is known to the employer, what they found is that they often report good attendance, punctuality, motivation, no greater than other employees, right? So I can maybe see as to why maybe there's some needs, right, that can make or the tolerance to sort of navigate the stress in terms of like maintaining and keeping a job. We can think of it as like, well, this is very stressful. Maybe we have to take days off, and that's the way that we're managing. And at the same time, if we're able to continue to do that, then that will help sort of tolerate that stress. So in summary, I see sort of the division, right? Fact or myth. But I think when it all comes back, it's really about being able to utilize those either internal resources, those coping strategies that will allow us to continue doing the job, right? So I think that's sort of the main key here. Okay, and then I'll go ahead and turn it over to Liena. And as soon as I see a hand, and I will make sure to come back at the end of our presentation, okay?
All right. Thank you, Karina. And well summarized. You know, I know there's, like you said, a little bit of a division, and I think hopefully this will just help debunk a little bit of the myth. And we want to give you some facts to better understand, and Karina will also provide some additional facts to that. So here's a third one. Thank you for hanging in with us on this one. So if you could follow the same process, is scan the QR code, and think to yourself, what do you think about this statement, if it's myth or fact? It is possible to prevent a mental health condition. It is possible to prevent a mental health condition. What do you think? Is that a myth or a fact? Give you a few moments here, and then of course in a bit, Caleb will be pulling up the results to see where everybody voted.
All right, a lot of responses coming in. Thank you, everyone. We'll give it another moment.
Perfect. Thank you.
All right, I'll go ahead and share.
Oh, wow. Look at that. Smack in the middle, 50-50. Wow, interesting. Yeah, right? It's an interesting question. I have to admit, being a mental health professional, I was thinking, I wonder what most people would be selecting and picking, maybe from their personal experience, what they hear, people in their lives, or sometimes in the media and themselves. So it's a little bit of shift now. It's a little bit more on the fact side than the myth side. Okay, but pretty down even in the middle. It is possible to prevent a mental health condition. Okay, let's go back to the original slide there. So, oops, I'm gonna lose your screen. Oh, lost the screen for a second there. So, it is a fact. You can prevent a mental health condition. If anybody was paying attention to the beginning, I mentioned a little bit at the beginning that you can prevent it, and there are steps to be able to take that. I do want to add, and Karina did mention earlier that as a caveat, if there are genetics involved, when a mental health condition does run in the family, the chances of someone developing a similar mental health condition or mental illness is higher. However, there are still steps that a person can take to try to decrease that likelihood of that occurring, or even prevent it from happening altogether. This is where self-awareness, knowing your resources, and acknowledging and reaching out for support is so critical. And that's why we're here. That's what we're talking about that. Because as Karina had mentioned, there's so much stigma around it. It's preventing us from being able to go there with ourselves as well as other people. Okay, so that's why the awareness is so important. So prevention of a mental health condition really, what it focuses on is really tackling known risk factors like trauma or history of trauma, as an example, and that we all can really affect the chances of not only adults but young adults as well as children from developing the mental health conditions. But when we're taking steps to try to promote our social as well as emotional well-being, it really can also lead to like higher self-esteem and stronger relationships with others. So it's just all extremely critical. Okay, let's go to the last one. Let's go to the last myth or fact statement. So, myth or fact, psychiatric medications are bad. Okay, so go ahead and scan the QR code and submit what you think the answer is. There's the subjective opinion, and it's also the objective opinion, right? So we'll see where the answers lay in a bit to see where everybody thinks of that.
All right, a lot of responses coming in. We'll give it one more moment.
Okay, awesome.
Okay, I will go ahead and share now.
Okay. It's a myth. All right, most of you said myth. I'm glad to hear that. I'm glad to see that. Okay, so thank you for contributing that. Let's go ahead and go back to the original slide. Yeah, this is a common belief though. I know there's still, there's the subjective belief that, yeah, I know it's good for, or it's helpful for whatever I need to manage physically as well as mental health, but do I want to? Right? There's that question, what does that mean? And that is a common belief, even among healthcare professionals themselves. Any time at their point of their lives that when they had to, consider, do I take medication for anxiety or depression that I might be going through? There is this belief that taking psychiatric medication is harmful, that it's an easy way out to deal with mental health problems. It's very common that there's a lot of belief in that. There's also a general belief or myth, I should say, that all medications are addictive and it's a sign that you're weak. And as you know, this is simply not true. I mean, if we thought about mental health as we do a physical health problem like diabetes or high blood pressure or cholesterol, right? For the most part, if a doctor suggests that you need to kind of maintain or actually bring down those levels, whatever it might be, a person might be more willing to take medication to try to stabilize that level. But they'll also maybe even try to engage in activities to keep it stable or at a low level, like a healthier diet, or try to do more physical exercise, or reduce any kind of stress level they're dealing with in their personal and professional life. The same is true for mental illness and our mental health overall. And for many people with mental illness, medication is absolutely necessary, right? Just like someone with, let's say, type 1 diabetes who takes insulin. Okay. And for some people, taking medication is really essential for survival and even be able to thrive in their life, right? And even for those who may, let's say, have mild to moderate depression or anxiety or ADHD, medication can really help ease those symptoms to really try to help them and allow them to function day to day even more effectively. But I also want to say that even in addition to taking medication, seeking kind of regular routine like therapy, counseling, can also be very, very helpful in just coping with daily life stressors, which can really just greatly improve a person's quality of life. So we want to really thank you all for, participating in the myths knowledge test, check, and I will turn it back to Karina for our next slide.
Thank you, Liena, and again, thanks everyone for your participation. And we wanted to provide more facts. So I wanna share some of these with you all, and that is how it relates to recent times and how there's been shifts. So overall, like depression is one of the most prevalent mental health conditions in the U.S. There's also more than 31% of people in the US that will experience anxiety disorder at some point in their lives. And anxiety disorders, there's different types, such as like the social anxiety. There's also specific phobias, such as fear of flying, maybe specific animals, heights. Maybe there's generalized anxiety. OCD also falls under the anxiety. And this can like develop over time, or just come up at certain points in our lives. Okay, there's also another fact that young adults between the ages of 18 to 25 in the US have the highest rate of experiencing any mental health concerns. So this is roughly about 33.7 compared to a different age group between 26 and 49. Okay. And also, as of 2020 in the U.S., suicide is the recording second leading cause of death in children between the ages of 10 and 14. And also, even this fact below, it's before even the pandemic, but there has been a shift on adults reporting experiencing measurable levels of loneliness. And this is according to the US Surgeon General report back in 2023. And what they found was that loneliness has been linked to physical and mental health problems, such as like heart disease, stroke, addiction, also suicidality and self-harm. And I believe they also mentioned dementia. So loneliness has been linked to a higher risk of those health problems. Okay. And next slide.
Thank you, Karina. It's pretty mind-blowing just getting those numbers. It's really humbling to just sort of kind of think, putting that into numbers. We also wanted to recognize and make sure to call out that there are also cultural implications when we talk about mental health, right? Beliefs around it, how it's discussed or acknowledged, if it's even discussed within a particular culture or even just within your family unit and your community, and how these aspects even impacts whether or not we're going to be able to even acknowledge to ourselves about our own mental health state and whether or not we're going to seek out help and support and resources. So it's a really big something that we don't want to ignore it because it has a huge impact. And mental health concerns, unfortunately, continue to be a stigma in most societies, including here in the U.S. Though I have to say, United States here are really moving the needle in really bringing more awareness and normalizing and really treating it as a real health, problem, and that we have to pay attention to that. But it also, it's an even stronger stigma in some cultures. And mental health challenges can sometimes, a lot of times be seen as a sign of weakness, right? But also even from a spiritual or religious perspective as an act of something evil. So these views can really keep someone from acknowledging that they need to talk to someone or even seek out help. Also, the reluctance to even discuss symptoms, and there are cultural taboos that really keep a person from even being able to share their mental health challenges with family and their friends or loved ones because they're worried that they might be judged or not taken seriously. And with that, there's the concern in the reality of the lack of support from their family and friends and the overall community. And it can really leave the person feel even more isolated, even feel ashamed, and just don't know where they can turn for help or even any assistance. And with that, especially around the cultural implications, it's so important that there are resources that are very relatable to the person seeking help. And I'm referring to, of course, in the community, but also just the counselors, the therapists, the mental health professionals themselves, that individuals who are going through these challenges feel like they can really connect with them, and understand the cultural factors that are at play so that they can feel like they're being understood, that they could get them, right, to understand the mental health needs. And just a quick plug here on this note that the UCLA, our Staff and Faculty Counseling Center, we not only do have clinicians who speak multiple languages like Spanish and Mandarin, but we also do our very best to try to link resources and provide referrals to individuals that we see with these cultural factors in mind. So that the clients, when they seek out resources, they feel like, it's really fitting to what they're looking for and where they're coming from too. Okay. All right, Karina, I'm going to turn it back to you again.
Thank you, Liena. And now this next slide, I want to introduce this next slide as a very quick sort of check-in, sort of like taking the baseline temperature on what it's been like for you individually in the past 30 days. Right. So think back in April 2022. So back in April 2022 to now. So think about it in those terms in that time frame. And just go through this list, just roughly scan it. And what we would like to do here is just as you're going through the list, we would like you to do the same process as the myth or fact. So scanning the QR code, but this time sort of selecting one that pertains, or it could be multiple, but maybe one of these signs or maybe some of these symptoms have you've been experiencing these symptoms over the past month. So we would like you to just kind of get a sense and a feel as to how it's been like in the past month. Okay, so it could be more than one. Feel free to select multiple if it applies. And you can go ahead and do the same process where you can go ahead and scan the QR code and enter your responses. And a reminder that this is confidential.
All right, thank you, Karina. I know this one's a little bit longer, so responses are still coming in. We'll give it a few more moments.
Okay.
All right, we'll give it just one more moment.
Mhm.
Okay, I will go ahead and share now.
Thank you, Kayla. Okay. So there's been some, generally, feeling anxious. That's feeling anxious. Sleep disturbance. That's a bar more on the higher end. There's agitated, irritable. Okay, another one, persistent physical discomfort. Okay. There's also been, I see, not taking good care of yourself. Okay, thank you. Thank you for those. And as we're looking at this image, I hope that this visual sort of helps like normalize that it is a very common experience to have some of these signs and some of these symptoms as we're navigating these constant stressors and demands, right? So we were really hoping that this allows, for us to really come and see together as a whole and collective that this is more common than we think, right? And sometimes we may not be able to visually see that in someone, and sometimes we do make a really good effort, right, of compartmentalizing, or maybe we try to conceal some of those signs, but that does not mean they're not present. So thank you so much for sharing sort of the experience that you are all having. Thank you. And I'll hand it back over to you, Liena.
Thank you, Karina. Yeah, I was just looking at the results. I mean, if anything, I hope it gave you a pause, right? Like Karina mentioned, a pause to think about where have I been at emotionally for this past month, just a month, maybe even just the last week alone, right? And if we're not pausing to think about where we're at, it's going to be a lot harder for you to think about what do I need to do? Where do I need to seek out support? Where do I need to manage that? So hopefully that's just, again, it's a tool for you to, at any point, to really pause and kind of check in with yourself. And what I'm going to be talking about is, okay, what do we do with that, right? What are some tools and techniques to try to continue to improve and even maintain and enhance as well your mental health? And, first thing I wanted to mention is, we often do hear about and actively try and keep in present mind and practice work-life balance, right, to manage our well-being. And indeed, it is very important. I do want to add that when we talk about work-life balance, it's not necessarily a 50-50 balance as much as we think it is or expect it to be. The reality is there will be some days when it's 70-30, 60-40, 95.5, wherever it might be, right? And so on. But I wanted to say is the intention and the awareness of whether or not we're spending a majority of our energy, which I'm going to talk about what I mean by that, on one aspect of our life, that's the key. So if we find that we're actually indeed spending most of our energy in one area, this one project, this one thing I have to finish and do in this work, and everything is sort of brushed to the side, put to the back burner, then our intention is to, maybe I need to rebalance and reallocate some of that energy to other areas that I've been not paying as much attention to, or maybe even neglecting altogether. That's the work-life balance, is that intention and awareness, as well as the act of spreading our energy to other parts of our life as we're trying to attain. So keep that top of mind and keep that in mind. So I'm going to pause a little bit here and talk a little bit more about this first tool that you see on the slide, which is the idea of energy management. Okay, so we know what time management is, right? We know that all too well, too well. But it's finite because there is a limit to it, right? 24 hours in a day. And probably some of you are thinking, thank goodness, it's just 24 hours a day, because I don't know if I can go beyond that. But there is a limit to it. But when we're looking at our inner resources, the energy resources are in the inner energy domains, which I'll talk about, it's unlimited to us. They're at our disposal at all times. So what are these energy domains I'm talking about? There are 4 of them. The first is the biological, which is our physical state, our physical domain. Then the second is our cognitive, so the way we think, in terms of our processes in our heads. There's also the psychological, which encompasses our emotional as well as our social domain. And then there's the spiritual. That's the 4th one. So biological, how do we express that particular domain from day to day? We express it by our physical stamina, right? Our immune system, be able to fight off, colds and flus whenever we can. Our sleep, right, in terms of how we're resting our bodies, and also our physical strength. This is how we express ourselves biologically and physically. And how we can strengthen that part is by improving on our heart, like getting a proper sleep, right? Not only just the 7 to 8 hours, but also the temperature we're sleeping in to give that restful sleep. It's just not being in bed and closing your eyes and kind of, zone out for a little bit, but like restful, deep, or REM sleep, that kind of really restful sleep needed. Nutrition, what are we putting in our bodies, right? The balanced nutrition, and just again, physical exercise. That's how we can, some examples on how you can strengthen that. The cognitive domain is how it's expressed is through our ability to focus and concentrate, right? Even our memory can be affected. Our ability to problem solve, and even do some creative thinking. This is how we express ourselves in our cognition. And how we can further strengthen that is by practicing mental rituals like meditation, crossword puzzles, trying something new, even a new hobby. Those are some examples how you can strengthen that. And then the third one is, again, that emotional and social aspect, and how we express that is through our ability to be able to experience positive emotions, even experiencing empathy, to have empathy for someone else, experiencing humor, or even just having this sense of joy. Those are how we experience our emotional aspect. And we can help further strengthen that is expressing gratitude, gratitude in terms of things that are in our lives, gratitude to people in our lives, create some internal scripts that keep us going, right? Encouraging ourselves to keep going. Self-compassion, that's so critical in terms of you give empathy to other people. How about sharing some empathy with yourself, right? Knowing our emotional triggers. And again, the social connection is so important. And then lastly, the spiritual domain. And how we express that is really one big piece is connecting what we do day to day to our core values. What's important to me? My family is important to me, my career maybe, my integrity, trustworthiness. There's a whole list of different core values. And am I doing what I'm doing every day in my life? Is that connected to what's important to me? The meaningful in our life. That's so important. And how we can really strengthen that part, the spiritual side of us, is knowing what our core values are. And is that aligned to my professional as well as personal life? Volunteering, right? Paying it forward. We feel really good about giving to someone something because we want to. We want to enhance someone else's lives. Showing random acts of kindness. Those are different ways. So the reason I'm talking about these 4 domains is that these are areas that we can try to see what parts of these 4 domains, internal sources, have I been neglecting or have I been not paying as much attention to? So really kind of reshifting that and putting that there, because that's always going to be there for you. There are other tools here. I'm not going to go into each one just in the interest of time, but I want to call out a couple more. I talked about self-compassion, right? And that's being aware of your own reactions, your emotions, your triggers, and just being able to observe them, but don't judge them. How many times do we judge ourselves and being upset with ourselves? We feel like, oh gosh, I'm so weak for feeling this way, or why am I feeling this way? We're already judging ourselves. It's not a bad or a good or weak or strong. Self-compassion is about allowing yourself and know that when you're experiencing something that's hard for you, and then what do I do with that? You know, do I talk to someone I trust about it? Maybe I need to take a few deep breaths and just kind of be present with it and let it kind of take care of it. Maybe I need to journal it. You know, that's you taking care of yourself rather than judging yourself for it. So self-compassion, it goes a huge, huge way in that. Setting realistic expectations and boundaries for yourself. And how many times have we told ourselves, oh, I should be doing this, I shouldn't be doing that. This should come into play. And how many times have we said that about someone else, right? To really set realistic expectations, but still being compassionate is, again, something to consider and think about. And one last thing I want to bring up from this list is flexibility, to be flexible. Now, sometimes people feel like if I be flexible, it means I'm giving up or I'm compromising my core values, what's important to me, you know, that whatever that might be. You can still have very strong core values, but also try and be adaptable to your environment when it's needed. You know, I actually want to share a saying by Bruce Lee that I think really provides a real visual of the significance of being flexible, especially when during challenging times. He said, notice that the stiffest tree is the most easily cracked, while the bamboo or willow survives by bending with the wind. So kind of think about it. You know, a bamboo is a very solid plant and tree, and willow as well, if you think about the root. But especially with the willow, when they're moving with the environment, the wind and whatnot, it's going with the flow, but they still have a very strong root in the bottom. But that's how you also survive, surviving in your environment. And that's really important in terms to be flexible with yourself, but it doesn't mean you're compromising your core values. Okay, so just some things to kind of keep in mind and some tools to keep in mind to help you manage once you're aware in terms of how you've been managing within the last month, within the last week, whatever it might be. So let's go to the next slide. We're going to talk about some resources available to you. And I hope there's a lot of things that you were able to take away, at least at minimum, some self-awareness. That's what we hope that you'll take away. But we also want to give you resources to know what's there, both at UCLA as well as out in the community. Helpguide.org is a wonderful online tool that really covers all kinds of behavioral health, mental health, even relationships topics. Not only does it give you some education around it, but also give you tips on how to go about doing it. We will provide this resource a lot. You can click on, you can go to the site and do a search by topic, and lots of stuff pull up. So that's one we want to make sure to mention. And a few at UCLA, in case you're not aware of it, UCLA Mindful Awareness Research Center. If you go to their website, they actually have free, I love the word free, hopefully you do too, free accessible mindfulness exercises, audibly as well. I think they have some YouTube links. They also have an app. I saw this on their website that you can download. This is available to you. So that's something you can use as well. UCLA Fitwell, probably some of you have heard of that. They have lots of great well-being kind of activities, both virtually as well as in person. So you go to, sign up with their, I think they have, you're able to kind of sign up with their distribution list for their incoming or upcoming events. You could definitely sign up for that. So to look into that. Again, the UCLA Wellness Wednesdays and webinars. There's a lot of great events that are happening all around wellness on Wednesdays. And if you want to learn more about self-compassion, please visit Dr. Kristen Neff, who is an expert around self-compassion, she's a psychologist. She actually has a website called selfcompassion.org. Take a look at that. There's a lot of tools that we will offer there. And then finally, National Alliance on Mental Illness, NAMI. This is not just domestically in the United States, but international as well. It's just such a strong organization for families and friends of those who do have a mental illness or mental health condition. They have support groups virtually as well as in person, but a very huge advocate of those with mental health concerns or mental illness. So really, really, really highly recommend that you connect with them. And next slide, this is My Strength. I don't know if anybody knows that this app is also available to UCLA staff and faculty, especially if you have insurance benefit through UCLA. And let's go to the next slide after that. I want to say a little bit what my strength is. So my strength is, if anybody's heard of Calm, it's an app. My strength is very similar. So what it is that it'll track your daily mood and see kind of where you're at. It also has tools like meditation and mindfulness exercises. It's a way to track where you're at on a daily basis. It's a wonderful comprehensive tool. And this slide shows you how to access and download that My Strength, depending on which insurance you have. Okay, so it's a different direction. So definitely keep this handy, and you will get a copy of this presentation at the end. So definitely encourage you to take a look at it and download it. It's definitely for you and your family members. And then the next slide, of course, got to mention our resource. We're here for all of you, not only for you as employees, but also your adult family members. So any family member who's 18 and over, we do see all of you in terms of individual counseling. There are up to three sessions available individually, not just per employee family, but individually to your employee, to you as an employee, but also let's say your spouse who wants to reach out and seek out some support. They themselves can get three sessions and such, so up to 3 sessions. And then what we'll do is we'll provide resources and other counseling referrals if they want to do ongoing counseling during the sessions. So definitely, and then we are confidential because we're licensed mental health professionals. We are confidential service. And at this time, just let you know, we are doing sessions virtually only, so Zoom or telephonic. Okay. Which is really, I think, convenient for those who are not, near UCLA campus. And then finally, this is the crisis line. Want to make sure that you're aware of the numbers to call by dialing 988. You can also text HOME to 741-741 to get immediate support. These are all 24/7, and also you can use a good old-fashioned phone by calling the National Suicide Prevention Hotline. There's also a more local resource, which is ACCESS. It's the LA County Department of Mental Health. They're also available 24/7 for counseling centers, referrals, resources, crisis intervention, whatever it might be. That's more of a local resource for everyone here. Okay. So I hope there was a lot of takeaway for all of you. We invite you and encourage you to reach out to us if there's anything we can do to support you, and just kind of be a lending ear, even that alone. So Caleb, I'm going to actually turn it to you to see, I know we had one question during our session, but see if there are any questions that we can answer in the time that we have, a little bit of time we left.
Yes, thank you, Liena. Okay, we have at least one question. If anyone has any questions, feel free to type in the Q&A. The one question we had so far, this is going back to the slide on protective factors, which Karina went over. Can having a therapist to regularly work with be a protective factor as well?
Definitely. Yes. This is a great way of ongoingly having the space to process, to vent, to get perspective feedback. So definitely, yes.
A resounding yes. Thank you for bringing that up. Yes. Great question.
All right, thank you. And do we have any more? We'll give it another moment or so if anyone wants to type a question in the Q&A. Otherwise, we'll turn it back to Pamela, but we'll give it another moment.
I have a question. After the,
Okay.
sorry, I couldn't figure out how to use the Q&A as a panelist, but after the 3 counseling sessions that are offered, are the ongoing sessions covered under those insurance plans that you listed in a previous slide?
Yes. So what happens is that we will, work with the employee or the individual if they do have their UC insurance, right? It's typically Anthem, HealthNet, MHN, or Optum, or Kaiser. And Kaiser has its own network, so typically you kind of reach out. But if you have UC Kaiser, you also have another insurance that covers behavioral health, which is MHN, for those who didn't know that. So we at SFCC can give you a list of different referrals, and they are covered. So I believe, and I'm looking at my little comparison chart right in front of me, that the first 3 sessions outpatient, and we're just talking kind of routine outpatient. And of course, there's different coverage depending on like if it's substance abuse, inpatient or outpatient. If it's more intensive outpatient, there's coverage definitely, but it give you more specific in what's covered. It just depends on what the level of care would be. But if you're talking about ongoing just sort of outpatient therapy, the first 3 sessions there's no copay. And then the 4th session and on, I believe typically, I think for each plan, it's $20 copay from there. But if anybody has any questions in terms of what the coverage would be, definitely reach out to the benefits department to get a little bit more information. But I hope that answered the question, Heidi. Great question. Thank you.
All right, thank you. We'll give it another moment in case anyone wants to ask another question in the Q&A. Okay, here we go. Okay, actually, this is more of a response. Heidi, someone did respond. I used the counseling after the first 3 included session. My copay for those Zoom sessions, this is the counselor that they were referred to, was $20.
Oh, there you go.
That was that person's experience.
Verification, confirmation. Thank you for that. Perfect.
All right, any other questions? Okay, so if not, the Q&A will still be there, but now I guess I'll turn it back over to Pamela.
Thank you so much. I wanted to really thank you, Liena and Karina, as well as Caleb, on speaking on this important message, this important topic. I think it's pertinent to know that what resources we have as UCLA staff and faculty. As mentioned, please reach out to the Staff and Faculty Counseling Center for additional support. So before we close, I'd like to turn it over to our president of UCLA Staff Assembly, Heidi Martinez. Let me share my screen. There you go. Go ahead, Heidi.
Thank you, everybody. Hello, my name is Heidi Martinez. I am currently the president-elect and incoming president for Staff Assembly. And I wanted to thank Liena and Karina and Caleb for taking the time to provide a wonderful and timely presentation during Mental Health Awareness Month. Thank you to all the attendees who joined today's webinar. I would like to invite you to stay connected with Staff Assembly via our social media platforms through LinkedIn, our main website, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter X. If you are interested in volunteering, you can sign up using the highlighted QR code on this slide or visit our website. Lastly, if you are interested in joining our board, please email us and we can schedule a one-on-one meeting to discuss open available positions. The requirement to participate on the executive board is to be a policy covered or non-represented staff member. And thanks again to everyone who participated today. Enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you,
all.
everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.